The lonely desert and the shepherd Moses. Long after the wonders of creation and the promises to the patriarchs, the story opens in silence and dust. Moses lives far from the palaces of Egypt where he once walked as a prince. He now tends sheep in the vast wilderness of Midian, serving his father-in-law Jethro. Day after day he guides the flock through rocky valleys and sunburned plains, listening to the wind scrape across the stones. The desert seems empty, yet it is alive with hidden movement, insects stirring under sand, distant birds circling the sky, and the quiet patience of sheep following their shepherd. Moses has learned humility here. The man who once acted in haste has become steady and watchful. His life feels settled and small, as if his story has already reached its quiet ending. But the wilderness, which looks barren, is a place where God often begins something new. A fire that does not consume. One day, as Moses leads the flock beyond familiar paths, he comes to the mountain of God, later known as Horeb. There, something breaks the rhythm of the desert. A bush burns with bright, living fire. Flames dance among the branches, glowing like molten gold, yet the leaves do not blacken and the wood does not collapse into ash. The air shimmers with heat and light. Moses feels the pull of wonder and fear at once. He turns aside to see why the bush is not consumed. As he draws near, the ground itself seems to awaken. This is no ordinary place. The fire is not destructive but revealing, as if creation itself is holding its breath. God calls to Moses from within the fire, speaking his name and claiming his attention. Moses answers with the honesty of one who has nothing left to hide. God makes clear that this ground is holy and that Moses must recognize the difference between ordinary soil and a place filled with divine presence. Moses covers his face, overwhelmed by awe, knowing he stands before the God of his ancestors, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The cry of an enslaved people. From the heart of the fire, God reveals deep concern for Israel. God has seen the suffering of the people in Egypt, heard their cries, and felt the weight of their oppression. Their pain is not distant or forgotten. It rises like smoke toward heaven. God declares an intention to act. The time has come to bring Israel out of slavery and lead them into a good and spacious land, rich and fertile, a place where life can grow freely. This is not merely a rescue but a restoration of dignity and promise. The fire in the bush mirrors this purpose, intense, powerful, and yet life-preserving. A reluctant chosen one. Then comes the unexpected turn. God reveals that Moses himself is to be the instrument of this deliverance. Moses is to go to Pharaoh, the mightiest ruler of his world, and demand the freedom of the enslaved people. The desert suddenly feels smaller, and the task feels impossibly large. Moses responds with doubt. He sees his weakness more clearly than his calling. He questions his worth and his ability, wondering how a shepherd could confront a king and lead a nation. God answers not by praising Moses but by promising presence. Moses will not go alone. The power behind the mission will not come from human strength but from God who goes with him. The success of the journey will itself be a sign that God has sent him, for one day the people will return to this very mountain to worship. The name that is and will be. Moses still struggles. He imagines facing the Israelites, who will ask which God has sent him. He asks for the name of this God, seeking something solid he can offer them. God reveals a name unlike any other. It speaks of eternal being, of existence that depends on nothing else. God is the one who is, who was, and who will be. This name is both intimate and mysterious, suggesting presence without limitation. It tells Moses that God is not bound by time, place, or human expectation. God connects this name to the history of the ancestors, assuring Moses that the same faithful presence that guided Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob now moves again for their descendants. This name will be remembered through generations as a sign of trust and continuity. Explanation and lessons. Exodus chapter 3 tells the story of a God who reveals himself in unexpected places and calls ordinary people into extraordinary purposes. The burning bush shows a world filled with divine presence, where fire does not destroy but transforms attention and direction. God's holiness does not push Moses away but draws him into deeper responsibility, asking him to participate in the healing of others. The chapter teaches that God sees suffering and responds to it. Pain and injustice are not ignored, even when they last for generations. At the same time, the story shows explanation and lessons. Exodus chapter 3 tells the story of a God who reveals himself in unexpected places and calls ordinary people into extraordinary purposes. The burning bush shows a world filled with divine presence, where fire does not destroy but transforms attention and direction. God's holiness does not push Moses away but draws him into deeper responsibility, asking him to participate in the healing of others. The chapter teaches that God sees suffering and responds to it. Pain and injustice are not ignored, even when they last for generations. At the same time, the story shows that calling often meets resistance within the human heart. Moses' doubts reflect common fears: inadequacy, uncertainty, and fear of rejection. God does not dismiss these fears but answers them with promise of presence rather than promise of ease. The revelation of God's name emphasizes faithfulness and constancy. God is not a distant force but a living presence who acts in history. From this chapter, one can learn courage rooted in trust, humility joined with obedience, and hope grounded in the belief that even in the wilderness, sacred fire can appear and change the course of life.